Good evening. My name is Rebecca Medellin, and tonight I'm going to be going over some recommendations that I feel may benefit the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. However, I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the history that led up to the implementation of this act. In the 1960s and 70s, many Native American children were being removed from their families and their tribes. Many social workers and judges at this time had very biased and stereotypical beliefs about Native American families and their tribes, simply because it didn't mesh with the current white culture at the time. As a result, about 25% of all Native American children were removed from their homes for these unjust reasons and placed into non-Native American foster care homes. As a result, it came to light that many of these children suffered some very negative consequences of being placed into foster homes that didn't respect and didn't know anything about their Native American culture. Many of these children suffered from some major behavioral issues, emotional disturbances, identity crisis, and just a lack of being able to form relationships with others because they were separated and often never returned to their tribes and their families. Fortunately, in 1978, Congress finally realized that what they were doing to these Native American children was not right. They realized that they needed to make a change and give some of the power back to the tribes, and that's basically what the Indian Child Welfare Act did. It gave these tribes basically full jurisdiction over any Native American children that were removed and placed into the state's custody. It gave these tribes the ability to create their own child welfare system and handle where these kids were placed, whether that be in a Native American foster home or a non-Native American foster home, based on that child's eligibility in their tribe and based off what they felt the best needs of that child were. However, even though this is a federal law that is supposed to kind of govern the jurisdiction of the removal of Native American children, just like any other policy, each state kind of has its own power to decipher and implement the law as they see fit. One of the biggest things that I think should be changed is adding or mandating that all people, all social workers, all investigators, all individuals working in the child welfare system have some additional training specifically on the importance of this act. Knowing the history and knowing the awful things that happen to these children and knowing the specific steps that need to be taken when a Native American child is taken into the state's custody should be a top priority so history doesn't repeat itself. I work at Child Protective Services currently, and I know for a fact that many of my coworkers do not know the depth and the importance of this act. They just know to ask certain questions to determine eligibility on the surface, but they don't know the extent of why we ask those questions. So it's easy for it to just kind of be swept under the rug without the proper training. So that would be my first recommendation. Secondly, the Indian Child Welfare Act also mandated that states provide appropriate funding to these families to help them get support to get their children back, various resources and things of that nature to help support them. However, many of the states, while they do provide some of these services and community resources, they're underfunded. And so my second recommendation would be to just supply more funding to this act. Supply more funding to help these families get their kids back. Supply more funding so these children can be reunited with their families and ultimately just have that cultural background and things that they need to be successful in life, because we have learned from our past mistakes that these children suffer some negative consequences when they are not returned to their families. And finally, I think there should be a mandate for an increased recruitment of Native American families to become foster parents. When we do take these kiddos into our custody, there's usually a very, very short window of where we can place them if there's not, even if this law is telling us that we need to place these children in Native American foster care homes, if there aren't any, if there's a lack of these foster care homes, we are not going to have much of a choice but to place them in non-Native American foster care homes, and that defeats the whole purpose of the act. So more money, more time, more energy needs to be spent on increasing the recruitment of these Native American foster care homes and families. Thank you guys for your time, and have a good night.